How to Disaster. My name is Jennifer Gray Thompson, and I'm so pleased this week to bring you a double episode. We are doing a collab, and Kim Marshall is here. She's a contributor for the How to Disaster podcast, and she has her own really wonderful podcast called LA Rising, which came out of the LA fires. And so Kim's going to explain our special guest today, and I'm going to throw it to you. Welcome, Kim.
Together today, Jen and I are going to address some profound wellness research that shows the world is waking up to the necessity of disaster preparedness. Jen, welcome.
I'm so happy to be doing this one with you, Kim. This will be really great.
Well, I'm welcoming you to your own podcast, but what do you tell me all the time about wellness and that topic coming up in your work?
So it wasn't this way when I first started about 8 years ago. People kind of knew we needed mental health. We certainly had Dr. Adrienne Hines on the ground in Sonoma County creating a mental health collaborative, but we didn't prioritize it in the same way we do now. And I think part of that is a result of compounding perils and catastrophes. You know, we had COVID. We've had so many disasters. It is the era of mega fires. They've increased about 250% in the last 8 to 10 years. We're all living in some sort of a little bit more stressed of an environment, social media, the federal landscape. More and more when we walk into communities, they are prioritizing wellness and especially mental health and over a longer period of time. And so people seem to really understand now it's not just a first when the disaster happens problem. It's actually an ongoing element that you have to maintain and really be intentional about.
Listen, this goes hand in hand with the research that we're going to discuss today. In fact, my top tier takeaway from these pages of research is that they really predict that the decades will show that, the 80s, every decade has its theme in wellness. The 80s, it was fitness to fight disease. The 2000s, it was mindfulness to fight burnout. The 2020s, of course, because of COVID, was immunity and longevity. And they predict that the 2030s will be defined by resilience. So before me saying anything else, let's welcome our guest. Jennifer, this is Cecelia Girr, and she's going to explain the research behind all these findings. Welcome, Cecelia.
Thank you, Kim. I'm so happy to be here and speak on behalf of the report. And Jennifer, it's so nice to meet you. I've come across your work and after the fire, and it's really meaningful. So thank you both for having me.
Okay, but just for a second, let me brag about Cecelia because you need to know her background. She's a journalist and strategy director for Backslash, and that's the cultural intelligence unit of Omnicom Advertising. They're a big deal in the advertising world. She's the editor and co-founder of their new zine called The Edge. And she's worked with brands like, the Golden Globes, Postmates, UNICEF, and categories like food, entertainment, telecommunications, and technology. She's a smarty pants, but I've interviewed her before, so I know she's also a cool person. So, Cecelia, would you mind sharing with us just a brief takeaway of the research, Ready is the New Well, that you did for the Global Wellness Institute and Summit this year?
Sure. Ready is the New Well actually came out of one of our edges at Backslash, which is the term for the meaningful cultural shifts that we coin and track over time, which at a high level is about the fact that extreme weather is no longer extreme. And you can see that in the data. In 2024 alone, there were over 150 record-breaking climate disasters globally, and 2025 continued that pattern. So two things really feel true. First, that disaster no longer feels abstract between the frequency of extreme weather and the way that social media is amplifying it. People are living in this constant low-level awareness that something could happen to them or near them. And then secondly, for many, they've lost the illusion that someone else is in control, and there's a growing recognition that systems aren't fully equipped to protect us. So as that responsibility starts to shift downward to individuals and their communities, we are seeing this idea of protecting ourselves and the people around us begin to reshape everything from what we wear to how we live to how we move through the world. And preparedness is a huge part of that. It's moving from something that was once considered fringe and associated with doomsday preppers into something much more mainstream and practical, which is both necessary and also exciting.
Just so that you know, like just the framing of it, it's like, and thank you for leaning into this particular side of it, because for those of us who are generalists, like we can't lean into every part of it, but we always feel sort of relieved when we find people who are incredibly good at this. And so I run this little nonprofit. It's national, but we're a pretty small team, and we walk into every mega fire that is federally declared in the United States. I feel like you sort of already answered the question, which is like, what is propelling this readiness is the new wellness, this lean into resiliency? Well, you've already answered it. Like, but what propelled you into really like leaning all the way into it and wanting to study it? It's one of those tools that we've been needing, but a lot of people shy away from it because it feels too hard for them. It feels too complicated, and they're also worried about doing the wrong thing. And so, can you talk about your own experience or journey into getting to that place where you wanted to study it?
Yeah, there were a few things actually. Well, first is that I track culture for my everyday job. And one of those edges that we track is this thing called inclement armor and the prevalence and, rapid increase in extreme weather events and how we are reacting on an individual level and also culturally. And then secondly, I lived in LA last year during the fires, and that was a very real and eye-opening experience. And it was 2 months when I was 2 months postpartum at that point. And so I think having both the work experience of tracking this on both a regional, local, and global level, and then also the really very personal experience of seeing it happen to people I love around me firsthand, it felt something really necessary to write about for global wellness.
I will tell you that in reading the research paper, it starts on page 82 of the 2026 trends that you can find on globalwellnesssummit.com. But you quote the National Center for Disaster Preparedness at Columbia, the author there, who says, "Fear doesn't drive preparedness. It drives paralysis." So tell me why inspiring fear doesn't work when it comes to disaster, of course.
This was a big one. Yeah, this is from Jeffrey, and he talks about how, especially post 9/11, a lot of the disaster messaging was essentially like, if you don't do what I say today, you'll be dead by tomorrow. And that sort of fear-based messaging is what drives paralysis, which I'll say doesn't really surprise me. I think a lot of parents would say the same thing when it comes to raising kids, that, for instance, fear doesn't lead to that positive behavior change. It leads to just shutdown. So in the context of disaster preparedness, when something feels too catastrophic, naturally, it becomes overwhelming and people decide to avoid the topic altogether. So the key is now about communicating in a way that actually empowers people to act. And there's this idea of channeling fear that's becoming really important. There's research from Yale showing that people who engage in even small acts of preparedness, say putting together a kit or making a plan, they all report lower levels of anxiety and depression than people who do nothing. So it's less about eliminating fear altogether, but rather giving people actions that they can take and actually move through the situation.
Yeah, I will tell you, I just interviewed the top meteorologist from Channel 1 in New York City, and he does a climate report every night. And he says, it's emotional for me, but I don't want to cause mass stampedes or fear or hysteria or people to turn off the TV. So it's all in the messaging.
So this is so timely too, because one of the things we're trying to do is to get people to understand that if they prepare and if they build back or they harden their homes in a way that they have a chance to withstand mega fires. I'm only a mega fire expert. I am not an expert in the other perils. What they do is that they actually can build better mental health, better physical health, and they're also helping their neighbor too. But we found is that time and time again, there's resistance even in a place like Los Angeles, and even where a terrible thing just happened, but people base their belief upon what has happened. That's how they propel or forecast what will happen. And so even when something as catastrophic as the LA fires happens, we still find all of the time that people think it's a one-off and that nothing more is going to happen, or that it was simply a failure of government and that it wasn't a result of actually climate change or the built environment. And we always say, like, it doesn't matter if you believe in climate change because it believes in you. And we have to find a way forward so that we're not like in the, here, I'm going to give you a stomach ache, right? And you're going to be so scared that you will be paralyzed, or I'm going to deny it and I'm going to essentially be drunk before noon. You know, it's like one or the other. You can't do those. In fact, there's a third way, which is exactly what you're talking about, which is preparedness. One of the biggest mental health bonuses that came out of the last few years for me and for so many people now across the country is the app. It's Watch Duty. And that was actually born here in Sonoma County during our 4th mega fire in 3 years, where we had like no nerve endings left at all. And John Mills, his very good friend, he was like, this is so silly. Like, why are we doing these 8 tabs open and we're trying to depend on this, we are depending on all these disparate places for information, but couldn't we just pull it all together into one app? And I have to say, and I just did a commercial for him maybe 2 months ago, that it was one of those things that as soon as that was there, my mental health improved because I was like, oh, I can put that side down. I don't have to stay up all night to push out good information because social media has led to so much bad information. So can you talk about the role of tech in your work? I really appreciate that you are incorporating that.
Yeah, I love that. And just to comment on one thing you said before, I think if you look at resilience and preparedness through the lens of what's happened with health over the past few decades, of how it went from something, our personal health, to something that we feared, to something now that we're engaging with and on a daily basis, I think that's really exciting that this can actually happen in an area that's also really useful in our lives. So just wanted to comment on that. And then in terms of the way that technology is democratizing preparedness, for a long time, as you mentioned, we've had access to this kind of information. So like satellite data and environmental risk, predictive modeling, but it was really limited to researchers and institutions. But that's changing. You now have AI powered systems like Google's flood and fire forecasting work that predict events before they happen. Of course, like you mentioned, there's the warning apps like Watch Duty, or earthquake systems like Japan's, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but Yurikuru Call, which gives millions of everyday users real-time actionable information. So instead of being told that disaster is happening when it's happening, they're able to see it coming, understand it, act earlier. So it's really exciting that while preparedness is becoming something we're embracing culturally, technology is the thing that's making it actionable.
Yeah, and I will tell you, Cecelia, tech is one thing, but I love that, of course, Japan is a leader, but the thing they're doing, Disaster Preparedness Day, and you also talk about social media influencers that are incorporating preparedness into their posts. You call these people preppers, which I think is so fun. So tell me how that's expanded to like fashion and gaming.
You're seeing that brands are starting to design for preparedness. There's a company called Bosai that actually makes jackets with hidden compartments for emergency supplies, or hats with built-in solar chargers so you can charge your phone during a crisis, which is really kind of cool. And you're also seeing it show up in retail. So Costco.
I like that.
I've never been.
That's like Target, Costco.
Yeah, we're calling it that. Costco is now selling what they literally call an apocalypse meal bucket, which is a 25-year emergency food supply. Really cool. And even more interesting, you're seeing it get gamified, as you mentioned. So in the Philippines, there's this board game called Master of Disaster that teaches kids as young as 5 how to respond to earthquakes and floods and fires through literal gameplay. So all of these innovations making it fun and approachable, which is really important because that's how preparedness moves from something that people avoid to something they actually engage with.
Wow.
I actually love that. There's a whole video online that I follow this woman who does all this stuff on housing on YouTube. And very exciting in my personal life. And I was like, oh, look, Kirsten Dirksen is her name. And I was like, oh, a prepper? And now I'm interested. Now I just don't think that they're a little nuts. Now I'm like, how can I be a little bit of a prepper? And in fact, the first two podcasts that I ever released were with my friend Josh Farrell, who is very much a prepper. So, and that was years ago. But I was curious on this one episode of YouTube, and then I realized it was John Mills. It was an episode on him from Watch Duty, and they actually characterize him as a prepper because he does have a lot of self-sustaining systems on his land. And I think that the more that we think about self-sustaining systems, things like balcony solar, which is so popular in Germany and gaining popularity here, but has some regulatory hurdles to pass and a lot of lobbying from the utility companies who don't necessarily want that. But I love this new emphasis on how can we actually not only just endure, but actually thrive at a time when we can't depend on external systems. And that's something that, because we had so many power shutoffs, which you will also experience more of those over the next couple of years, and then they'll get it together and they'll do more microgrids. But on our first years after our fires, we had for about 2 years multiple blackouts where we'd have them for 6 days at a time. Paradise had them up to 2 weeks at a time. And, so many of us were not prepared for what that would mean. What's an inverter? What are all of these tools out there? And so we are looking to preppers where we once may have maybe not been so complimentary. But I'm really appreciative of all the work they've done to hopefully make it easier for the rest of us. So I like that. I like how you're talking about that and relating it directly to mental wellness. So I just want to give you a shout out there.
What's interesting is that the hashtag disaster prep has already surpassed 700 million views on TikTok. So people are really interested in
Thanks for the tip.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. It's really popular. And as you say, people are really interested in literacy right now, whatever form that comes. And especially when it allows you to live your life in a more capable and empowered way. That's great, and it's useful information. There's so much of scrolling that is not useful content that you're consuming, and to think about actually spending that time on your phone doing something that's going to help you in a time of need. I think people are drawn to
huge.
that.
Is there a demographic sorry, Kim, is there a demographic that's really interested in that in particular? I'm just curious about that part.
I don't have the exact segmentation, but I would say that because it's on TikTok, that it's, probably it's the younger generation who are really looking for more educational content.
And I will tell you, speaking of younger generation, I've been doing this since 2 weeks after the fire, on the street, interviewing people. And every single time I put my camera in front of a young person, I am freaking inspired. I mean, the high school kids had to go to school at Pally High, half burned down. They had to go to an empty Sears building for school and use outhouses or whatever. And the way they're like, we're together, it's okay. And this weekend, we were back at their school for a community gathering. It's open now. And I interviewed these 4 kids ranging from 6th grade to 3rd grade. Now that is not that old. And their composure and their understanding that, they lost their trampoline, their zip line, because these weren't poor kids. And they were like, these are just things. But now I have new friends and we went through this together. What? I can't even. So tell me, what positive developments? I mean, I see that. But for you, Cecelia, what are you seeing around the world in dealing with post-climate trauma?
There's actually a lot of hope in this space. One of the most encouraging things that I've seen is the rise of community-based models, because it turns out that the strongest predictor of survival isn't wealth or technology, it's social connection. We see that globally in climate cafes in Europe, mutual aid systems in the Philippines, local alert networks in Africa. But I've also seen it very locally, as I'm sure you both have as well. During the Los Angeles wildfires, there were groups like community brigade in Malibu.
We love them.
I watched closely. Yeah, we love them as the fires were happening, and they really showed what that looks like in practice. And so for me, there's a line I love from the research that, your first responder is rarely a firefighter, it's a neighbor. So social connection and community and belonging is so important here. And I think this is the inspiring part, because when you look at rates of loneliness and disconnection in the world, here you have this common foe, this shared problem that's actually bringing people together. And it's getting people to turn to their neighbors and say, how can we rely on each other more? And there's a real return of community in that, and knowing the land that you live on, the weather, the rhythm of the world around you. And in that sense, it's cool to see that community becomes one of the most powerful forms of resilience. So that was exciting for me.
Okay, this is my favorite thing ever, because really our specialty at After the Fire is walking into these communities, all over the nation, but especially in the West, into Maui, into the double disaster in Los Angeles. And we are preaching the power of community. Like, you are the ones you've been waiting for. And our job, your community, and it's not our job to teach you community. Our job is to teach the community how to disaster, literally. Like, how do you make it through and then just stay during all the different stages? And they know, there's been research that shows that it is the number one indicator for whether or not a community can come back. Most people think it's money. And unfortunately, that leads to a lack of compassion sometimes for communities that are perceived to have a lot of money, or do have people in them that have a lot of money. And they think, I should only be helping over here and not over here. And what we're trying to say to them is, it's actually, money can actually even slow you down, because if you don't believe in the power of community, or if that's not how you're accessing your superpower, then you think that maybe you could go through it just paying your way out of it. But then that also leads to things like custom homes. It can also lead to other things like not communicating well with your neighbors. And so one of the programs that we bring to every community when it's appropriate, Maui didn't need it in the same way, which is block captains. And block captains is really just a way of organizing communities. It's really basic. It's not genius at all, but it really works. And so we saw it work so well here in Sonoma County that when it's appropriate, we take it to other communities and we show them, and then we support them on how to set it up. And it's really a wonderful thing to watch, because communities that were even not that close before, when they come out of it and they're walking through it, they never feel closer or more attached to their people and their place. And when people ask me all the time, like, isn't your job sad? I'm like, oh, have you met the people that I meet, though? I mean, I think they're incredible. And it's really the biggest superpower. So I could go on about that forever, but it is just so central to our job. And if I can make one plug for Rebecca Solnit, is a beautiful essayist. Love her. Right? I love her. I'm reading right now. Yeah, I'm reading right now her, The Beginning is After the End. I think that's what it's called. And it's after Hope in the Dark. But somebody introduced me to her after our disaster, to a wonderful book that she wrote, called A Paradise Built in Hell. And it's the communities that arise after disaster. And I just think it's a must read. And it let me know that what happened in my community is actually normal, and that human beings lean into each other. And it's just a wonderful indicator. So I love that you mentioned that. Thank you.
We love that. It's really interesting when you look at a lot of the reporting and cultural journalism out there about the death of the neighborhood, and all of these researchers crying that, people don't know their neighbors anymore. There's a lot of sense of fear and isolationism, especially in American communities. This is something, especially when I watched during the LA fires, the way the community brigade came together and trained up local volunteers who had no previous firefighting experience, but were trained to help with evacuations, home inspections, fire suppression, serve as a bridge between professional firefighters and the local community. Man, I was so inspired, so inspired. And I do think that model should be replicated worldwide, because what they are doing is what we should all be thinking about in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, let me tell you, my fiscal partner is called Creative Visions, and their headquarters is in this big white building that's kind of a landmark in Malibu. But what's so weird right now is that it's on a little teeny cul-de-sac that is the only thing standing for 7 miles about. And you know why? Because this heart surgeon, who was also a trained civilian firefighter, went back with his son, who's also trained, and saved the little cul-de-sac. So I went to a gathering where they were honoring them. And now the young man, the son, is majoring in college in building back communities, fire smart, disaster smart. Anyway, emotional. And we're all fine. And go ahead.
Kim, can I just talk about Community Fire Brigade for just a moment too? Because there's a couple of things that I really love there. So we love Keegan Gibbs as one of the co-founders, and he was really angry after the Woolsey fire. He felt abandoned, he felt alone, he had a lot to say, he came out really hot, right? And then he took a moment and he was like, wait a minute, I get it. There were failures, but what can I do in order to become part of the solution? And so David Hertz and Keegan Gibbs and some other people who were affected by the fires, they got together and they are sanctioned by LA County. So for those of you who are listening to this and you think, oh, well, that would never work because we have a fire department. Well, LA County Fire Department is how they operate underneath them and how they get their training. They are a nonprofit, so they can always use donations. But we have really enjoyed working with Keegan and also watching his evolution from somebody who was, there's always a lot of anger and fear, even more so after a disaster, but he turned that into something that actually helped the community. And it's one of those things that we always say, like, you are the ones that you've been waiting for, June Jordan. And he leaned all the way into that. And so he's actually going to meet with the people in Lahaina because they would like it too. And so we agree with you that it should be absolutely exported. There are similar programs in Lake County above me, and then in Boulder County as well. Not very similar, but not quite the same. So I love that you called that out. So right on. Very good.
And also, I want to brag about Jen for a moment. The only reason I met her is because there's a group in Palisades called Team Palisades. And the reason they exist is because one of their founders, was searching, like so many people do, how do you disaster? And she came upon Jen's podcast, listened to every episode, reached out to her, and then after they did the block captain thing for Palisades, told me about it. And he said to me Saturday, he goes, Kim, one of the best things, and who can think of best from a fire, is the people you meet, like Jen, like you. And I was like crying. He's so great.
Tony Hawking, shout out, love him. He was really impressed because he emailed me, and I think it took me 17 minutes to return his email and call him. I just called him, and this is like 12 to 14-hour days all day long. But those are the people that we're looking for that have high social capital, and then we can leverage that for them or show them how to leverage that to be part of a community, because it's really on everybody to recover, which goes so much to what you're talking about, that they do often end up with better mental health outcomes on the other side of that because of the resilience.
Hi there. Here we are in the Palisades on a beautiful Saturday. Can you tell me who you are and why you're here today?
I'm Josie Tong. I'm a volunteer and a Palisades resident. I'm here to participate in the resource fair and talk about our preparedness training programs that we're offering to Palisadians.
Perfect. And sir?
My name is Dr. Patrick Cohen. I'm a Battalion 9 CERT coordinator, Community Emergency Response Team for the Los Angeles Fire Department. Battalion 9 serves the west side of Los Angeles. And I'm also a practicing dentist.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So tell me why January 7th changed your life and spurred you on to more volunteerism.
I have been a Palisadian for over 20 years, and I've always volunteered for the Red Cross for a long time.
I can see that by your necklace.
Yeah, and I thought I knew about preparedness and disaster operations, but until it happened to your community, and when you see your community destroyed completely, you really don't know what it's like. And that was when I realized that I loved this community too much to let it go. I had to be part of the recovery effort.
How about you, Patrick?
I've been in the Palisades for the last 15 years, and I was in the Palisades 8 years before that. I got involved with the fire department's training on 9/11, actually the week before. And it's just one of those volunteer things that I find very rewarding. And being a local Palisadian and being able to put in the time and energy to help people and train people to prepare for, hopefully won't be a major, but somewhere along the lines, another disaster, living in Los Angeles, a major earthquake or something like that.
So tell me what message would you like to get to our listeners about the importance of preparedness, even if they thought this was the biggest one, it won't happen again?
Well, we live in a world that we will have disaster, large and small. It might not be another major wildfires that wiped out the entire community, but it could be a small brush fire, a house fire, a rain event that closed the roads, or earthquake, like Patrick just said. And the more we are prepared, the more we will feel empowered. And that's really how we can proceed on the road to recovery. So we want people to know what to do so that when events happen, we're not nervous, we're not scared, and we know how to react.
So Patrick, you worked at 9/11, you train people. What is the message you want them to know beyond have a to-go bag? What's beyond that?
The message I would give, which I've quoted earlier, Josie, is don't bring a knife to a gunfight, meaning you always have to be prepared for whatever disasters are out there, and it'll give you more peace of mind if you are so.
All right. Now, why do you think they need to concentrate on this? Josie, how often do you do disaster preparedness workshops?
So starting this year, we have been doing it once a month. Every month on the last Saturday of the month, we are doing working with the city to do a Ready or LA neighborhood training. And in the afternoon, we do something different. Sometimes we do it with the Red Cross. And last month, Patrick did a presentation on the different types of go bags. And also every month, we start doing the emergency radio or walkie-talkies trainings for people so that they know how to use the walkie-talkies and how to communicate during disaster. And that happens on the third Tuesday of every month in the evening.
Now, what has the community's response been to your efforts? What do you think?
The community is great, especially since the fires. We've seen a lot of people who, for whatever reason, we'll call it PTSD or whatever, have gotten more involved in doing the CERT training, community emergency response training, and getting involved in their local communities. And it's not just the Palisades, because we take care of all the way from Westwood to Topanga and from basically just north of Westchester to Mulholland. So people say, wow, this happened there, it could happen anywhere. And so we're finding people getting more involved and wanting to learn the things that they should learn and be able to do. It's just like if you have a family member who has a heart attack, you want to learn CPR and know what to do in case it happens again.
To anyone, right?
Exactly.
So you said you're also, I think, a dentist. You talk about, one of the pressure release valves we have is grinding our teeth.
Yeah, it's a unfortunately very common pressure relief valve. People have heard of TMJ, or we call it temporomandibular dysfunction, as opposed to joint. The joint's right here. It's made up of the lower and upper jaw, and there's a tendency when we're under stress, some people clench their teeth, some people grind their teeth, and over time that can cause obviously damage to the teeth. It can cause damage to the joint, just like you have cartilage in your knee, you have cartilage in the joint. And so we want to make sure that people are aware of that. And there's some simple things you can do to stop it from happening or prevent it.
So you try to tell people that, to relieve that pressure. Now, Josie, we talked about the Global Wellness Institute saying that one of the top trends for right now is for people to prepare. They have preppers on Instagram, whatever. Why do you think preparing for a disaster would bring joy and relief? Why?
I think it really makes you feel empowered because you know what to do. It's the unknown that makes you stress, right? So now that you go through these training, you know the methodology, you have all the supplies you need at home. And so when it happens, you know what to do. You know whom you can work with to help each other survive. So I think that gives you the peace of mind and that makes you feel empowered. And it's not just doing emergency. By bringing neighbors together, we take care of each other on daily stuff. like little brush fires or illegal dumping, or somebody needs help, we know where to go.
So what would you tell a child that said, I'm scared, I got stuck, my mom couldn't get me at school? How could you give them an encouraging note from the work that you do?
Well, one of the things with children especially is you just got to be really positive. And you can't be, everything's going to be all right. You got to, because the kids don't believe that. Mm-hmm. So you want to say, okay, let's do this, let's do that. Do something that's going to get them motivated, distracted, doing something that's really going to help them, work for them.
Let me ask you, you reference, Cecelia, disaster literacy, and you say it'll become the new social currency. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, just the way that people track their steps or wearables, there's a growing sense that becoming disaster literate and knowing what to do and having a plan is going to be the marker of responsibility and awareness. So again, to what we talked about, you see it on social media. You have creators that are breaking down how to pack a go bag or read the warning signs. I have a friend that his whole block has created a plan for an earthquake or for fires where each house on a block has a different role to play. So again, this sort of disaster literacy and plan making is transforming the, practical preparedness into something that's more mainstream. And again, not something that we're looking at and saying, those people are really reactive to a future that's not here yet. The future is here and we are living in this reality. So how can you move through it in a more capable way?
And because FEMA will tell you that the first 72 hours, you have to be prepared to be on your own. And until you go through a disaster, like you don't have the language. And it would be, I'm hoping that with work like yours, that, and with your research in there too, is that people totally normalize it. It's they democratize it, they normalize it. That's one of the things we've been talking about a lot in LA, because there is a pushback there on rebuilding back the built environment or hardening the built environment in a way that you can withstand a megafire. A lot of perils are not solvable. Megafire actually is solvable, like to the degree of the harm that it causes. And I keep trying to, break through the cognitive dissonance. And one of the things that I've been using a lot as a reason, I said, there was for a very long time in America, we were like, yeah, indoor plumbing, indoor toilets, especially, that was disgusting. We were like, why would anybody do that? Like, that's government overreach. That's expensive. Why would we use the same bathroom with men and women, which I didn't know they had different outhouses. So I'm super curious about that. But it became then something they did in hotels out of necessity. And then wealthy people got some, but the most of America was like, no way, not doing this. And the government did not get involved until we had a big cholera and typhoid outbreak. And, it took, I think, until 1960 or so before we had 99% of people actually had indoor toilets. But I like us to think about this now. Like, would you even go look at a house that didn't have an indoor toilet? I mean, you might, I would not. And in fact, they're a beauty feature, right? It's something that can actually really raise the sale value of your home. Not only, and it keeps you from getting typhoid and cholera. We are here for that. And it's normalized. And so what I'm hoping is that these measures that we're asking people to take become normalized and that they feel more empowered, which is what all your research is leading to. And so it's very validating to know that you are leaning in so hard to that piece of it. So thank you for that. I love that.
I love that. And I think it will be interesting in the future, especially specifically in LA, when you look at houses that don't have earthquake or fire coverage, houses that aren't made with resistant materials, houses that don't have home hardening and have plants right up against the perimeter of the house. So all of these things that we're learning are really important or have known they're really important. We're going to be looking through it with that different lens, just like you say with toilets. It's going to be a feature that we are demanding.
And if you have any hot tips on how to pierce the veil of denial, people who are denying that it's going to happen, I'll take them all day. Anything.
And also, Cecelia, you talk about some communities that are already doing it. They're actually branding themselves as sort of disaster ready. Where have you found those?
Yeah, there are a few. I mean, there's a few, I would say, have you heard about sponge cities?
No.
Really interesting. So there's this new concept called sponge cities where the city is actually made to absorb water as it comes in, so really flood resistant. There are several new ideas that are showing us what it could look like to be disaster ready, depending upon what disaster your community faces. And I think that's really interesting, and we'll start to see that more in the future.
Where are these? Like Florida? Where are we working with these? Other countries? Like where?
Texas really needs them, Cecelia. We could save a lot of lives, you know?
Texas has massive exposure to mega fires. Massive. There's a report that came out after the 2024 Smokehouse Creek fire in the Texas Panhandle that was 1 million acres in like 2 days. It was a grass fire, February 2024. And so I've been working with this community called Canada, Texas, and they were not federally declared, and so they needed a lot of help. But the woman that I work with participated in a study to Greg Abbott to say that there's actually the vulnerability. There's all of these abandoned oil wells that are still energized all across the Texas Panhandle and Oklahoma. God. And the point is maybe they shouldn't be.
You think? Oh my God.
I mean, that's what caused the fire.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of these examples that's really interesting is in Puerto Rico. They have something called the Bay Shore Villas development, where it was engineered for hurricane resilience, and it had underground cisterns capable of holding a huge amount of storm water and solar panels and generators to keep all of the common areas running during outages. So that one is really interesting to me. And also you have in California where a lot of super adobe homes are being created in neighborhoods that have been burned, that are serving as this clear sign of a smarter way to rebuild. So in the future, you might see more of these areas that actually brand themselves as disaster resilient areas, but we're seeing the beginnings of it right now.
And just for your own, you might enjoy looking at a company called Icon Build out of Texas. They actually have the first contract to 3D print on the moon. And we had them at my summit a couple of years ago. They've been there twice now. And I asked them about 4 years ago if they would do wildfire homes. So they're 3D printing homes, and they just finished a 100-unit subdivision outside of Austin. And they have now an entire array of different types of homes that you can choose according to your peril. It's a choose your own peril adventure in addition to any other thing you want to do. They can also now do a multi-story or commercial. I think those are really interesting. The problem is that right now the price per square foot is out of reach for a lot of people. But I love all the innovations. There's another company out of Houston called Nanotech. And they actually have a polymer you can put in house paint or any kind of paint or any kind of material that makes it virtually fireproof. And so I had them speak at the summit too. So we're always looking for new ideas. And I have a feeling that you'd be, a wealth of knowledge for these new ideas because you're always looking out for them. What's your favorite one?
Of the ones you just mentioned? I
just
mean,
any of them.
No. I'm like, I would love to interview them. They sound very, very, very cool.
Oh, yes, I could definitely give you them. But like of all the innovations that you've seen, like what makes you really excited and optimistic and hopeful?
If I'm being honest, I think what makes me most excited are the things that haven't been done yet. And and the things that we haven't seen, because there are so many opportunities in this space. For instance, when you think about earthquakes, we know when earthquakes happen, especially when we talk about the big one up in the Pacific Northwest, they know that it could trigger a tsunami. And for tsunamis, the easiest way to survive, or one of the only ways to survive, is to get up high, right? And to get up to a tower. And so we know there's some companies right now who are looking for permits along the coast of Oregon and Washington to build these towers so that people can escape tsunamis when they do come. And when I think about that, there's just so much opportunity for really cool urban planning that fuses aesthetic with real functionality in the face of disaster. So for me, that's the most exciting thing, are blending the way we live and the way we want to live with something that's going to actually make us really future proof.
Wow, that's so powerful. That really feeds into, this whole podcast is about the intersection between disaster and wellness. And you and I met, Cecelia, via the Global Wellness Institute and the summit and the podcast I launched and hosted for them called Global Wellness Conversations. So in your research on disasters, you talked about the implications for the wellness industry in this trend. How can you explain those to us?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I think it's important to explain how they're related. So, when we talked about this a little bit before, that the wellness component is so important, and preparedness itself is becoming that form of self-care, and that, it's expanding to be something much more fundamental, basic skills for survival. And so when we talk about implications for the wellness industry, they're really vast and far-reaching. I think we might start to see wellness spaces take on a much more functional role. So think a gym or a retreat or a wellness center. There's a real opportunity for those to double as resilience hubs. So maybe think cooling centers during a heat wave, or safe spaces during a crisis, or hubs for preparedness education. I think what's great is that these are already trusted everyday spaces. So in many ways, wellness brands can begin to fill that sort of infrastructure because of the fact that they're hyper local and they're deeply trusted and they're already wired for behavior change. So I think that one's interesting. And additionally, in terms of implications, as people live with evacuation and displacement and loss, we'll start to see climate trauma become a distinct category within wellness. We're starting to see it, but I think it'll become far more cemented than it is now, whether that's therapy centers focused on climate-related PTSD, or spaces designed specifically for nervous system recovery after crisis. So
I've got one. Just sorry, but it's a very LA thing, and I like it so much. So I hate that this happened to LA, but I really love the fact that you guys are full of creators and doers, and everyone's directing or producing it in some way, and that can get in the way, but it can also be fabulous. One of the things that we discovered this year is something called the Reality Center that's in Santa Monica. We love it. I don't know if you've been, Kim, but I think I've mentioned it before, but I really want you to go.
Yep.
And because I'm interested in the side of it that can reset your nervous system through, psilocybin mushrooms or, other therapies. But what if you don't have time to do that? Like, I don't have time to do that. And I would be a little nervous too, but, it's digital psychedelics essentially. So you lay down on like a massage table, and then it'll vibrate at certain intervals, but it also has sound, and then the visuals are crazy. They put something in front of your eyes, and you close your eyes, and they're only using like 3 light waves, but you see all different kinds of colors, and they take you on like a journey for an hour, and you're wearing headphones, and it's very immersive. And I've been 3 times now, and I feel like I've flushed my brain every single time. And we keep taking fire survivors because they have a grant from FireAid to do some of this work for fire survivors. And we want people to recognize that don't wait for it to be a crisis before you actually attend to your nervous system, and educate yourself on what your nervous system is telling you. So what do you like the vagus nerve? So have you heard about those types of therapies too?
I have heard about those. I haven't specifically heard about them in the respect of fire trauma and trauma after a wildfire, but I have heard about, all of these sort of digital psychedelics that we're seeing used for PTSD. And frankly, I think it's really, really exciting. And I think as we can start pushing the bounds of how we're treating mental health right now, I think it's essential. And especially the fact that you've already been 3 times.
I think
I'm
you and
going to
Kim
hold
should
you
go.
guys. I'm going to hold you guys to this. Are you ready? Here's what's going to happen. Number one, every day I meet someone who's still in trauma, right? I did a writing workshop for fire survivors, and the mom, a fellow mom, raised her kid in the school system with mine. She wrote a story and said she called the fires because she lost her house, her heirlooms, her kids' history. And she said, it was a triple murder of body, mind, and soul. Now tell me that woman doesn't need some healing. So one of the things that's really simple is the power of the sauna. You know yourself, Cecelia, right? How much the spa industry says hot, cold, hot, cold. Well, it is one of the only ways to cleanse wildfire toxins from the lungs of especially firefighters. So we love that. But this morning I was talking about you both because I'm an ambassador for Global Wellness Day, which happens once a year. It was started by a fire survivor. So every community is supposed to do something for free to educate people, right? So today I told them we're going to do, because the theme is joy this year. How can you be joyful with all that sorrow and all that fear? So we thought we'll ask Cecelia to help and Jennifer to support us in doing disaster preparedness workshops on Global Wellness Day, because that could bring joy to people. Like, I'm ready. What do you think?
You may have to rename it if you want to bring joy. Just the name of the workshop. I've been doing this a long time.
Okay.
It needs a rebrand.
It needs a rebrand.
That's your business, Cecelia.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna
we're in. We're in under the clause that there's a rebrand.
Mm-hmm.
Yay. Fabulous. Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that we see globally, but here in the United States in particular, as a response to the pandemic, is that wellness sort of like the whole industry is sort of like careened into this RFK space and started rejecting traditional medication, which, some of that, you should have agency, but then some of it is about herd immunity. And so I'm wondering if you're seeing any trends towards things that are perhaps less. I see that as a response to fear and trauma, so much of it. But what are you seeing? Are we going to get better around that? Because that's the thing that makes me the most nervous about even the word wellness. Like, I love it. I'm super interested in it for my own well-being and the people that we serve. But as a movement, though, I am a little nervous about where it's headed in the past few years. And I'm not being political, I'm being cultural.
I see it more as a collapse in trust, where we're seeing that institutional trust is being replaced by individual trust. People might trust a specific doctor, not the medicine itself, or a specific journalist, not the newspaper, maybe a specific founder, but not the company. So I think that's really interesting. And what we're seeing is this sort of micro trust that's earned person to person, verified through behavior rather than messaging, and almost, like impossible to fake. So in that sense, I think that's what's interesting there, and why we might be seeing the rise of people looking to these sort of alternative, unfounded, perhaps not credible theories within medicine. And I think that there's a big upward battle that systems and businesses are going to have to travel in order to win back trust by people who've lost it. If that answers your question.
I think it's a great answer. And it actually, when you were talking, then I think that, like, we'd never seen so many conspiracy theories around disaster until the last couple of years. Certainly, we'd never seen it politicized in the same way. And so I think that there are certain people who are feeding off of that. But the number of people, like when the Maui fires happened, they were like, well, if you have a blue roof, like who really believed it, that somehow it was laser pointers. We had a little bit of that, but it was super on the fringes. And now it seems to have melded with other political movements. And so then, there's especially online behavior, which part of it's bots for sure, but there's idea that somehow there's a cabal out there that are burning down communities on purpose in order to rebuild them. And it's such a distraction, and it's very hurtful for the people undergoing it at the same time. So when you were saying that, it actually linked it much better for me. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's definitely a huge problem that we talk about a lot in our work as well across industries.
And for me, living here on the ground with the sorrow of seeing the rubble of the place I lived in, and my baby was brought home, and it's where we got married, and it's now a pile of rocks looking out at the ocean. I had to do something because people's sadly natural reaction is to blame, to be angry, to be frustrated. I can't heal with that. And I don't think other people can too. I don't think it's sustainable long term. So that's why I decided to focus on real wellness. And real wellness starts with the mind, right? And then it links to the body. So that's why I love so much what you're doing. I love meeting Jennifer because it's practical solutions. And I think in the end, that's what Ready is the New Well is, right? You're empowering people with practical solutions so their minds can be put at ease. Is that right?
Yeah, and building mental resilience.
Right. So tell us why you think it will actually be, as I mentioned at the outset, the trend for the next decade, for the 2030s.
That's a big one. I mean, I think for this one, when you look at the youth, right? This is the defining issue of their generation is climate change and a very rapidly changing world. And I think for many, it's fighting the nihilism that comes with the territory and fighting for a more hopeful future for both themselves, their friends, their kids. And so I think that's why this is so important, because it's not just a nice to have, it's a need to have.
Oh, well, I really love that both of us were able to talk to you, Cecelia. Jen, I hope you two are longtime friends, and I knew you'd enjoy meeting this great, brainy, cool person.
You were right, Kim. You were absolutely correct. Yeah. Very important work. I am so grateful that that you exist, and that it's not just hand wringing, but instead it's actually leaning all the way into it. And it's exactly the space and the intention that we need. So I appreciate it. And thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to spend the time with you. And Jennifer, yes, I do hope we're friends for life as well.
Oh, and we'll see you all on Global Wellness Day. Ready is the New Well.